Hey guys, so I'm going to quickly kind of go over and explain how to do Studio 4. So I'm going to go to Modules and scroll all the way down the death scroll down to Studio 4. So this is going to be due on November 19th, which is later next week. Well, actually in session 1 next week, but Thursday. So I have a little bit of time to work on this, and the main point of this one is to really think about reading and sifting through your research for specific things that are kind of jumping out at you, quotes, statistics, images, graphs, video clips, and excerpts, stories, just things from all over the place in your research that are not whole sources, but like specific information that you, even if you don't know where exactly you want to put it, things that you know would probably be helpful or could be helpful somewhere in your research or stood out to you for some reason. So you have two things you're going to be doing. First, you're going to be doing a reading response called from your journal. So that is linked kind of in the next page. So I'll explain that, called Read Then Write. And then you're going to be creating what I call a research map using Padlet. I provide the kind of Padlet template, and you just make a copy of that Padlet, and then you can design and kind of play with it from there how you want. So I'm going to go to the reading response first. It's pretty straightforward. There's the link to your reading. You have some prompts here. I ask you to choose at least 4 out of 5, and you can either do a written response or you can do a short video. Couple of things I did, bold, like where it, to ask you to use specific examples or to quote or reference the author's words. But please make sure, like I don't do reading quizzes. The point is when you're writing, you are showing that you read by pulling from the text. So either quoting or paraphrasing specific things from the text. And then responding to 2 peers. Your research map is here. So I'm providing a Padlet. I'm going to open that up and kind of show you how to do it. And I also have here directions that I provided from Padlet for how to remake the Padlet. So if you click on it, it will take you to like what to click on and how to do it and that kind of thing. I'm gonna pull this down a little bit, and really you just click this button, and sorry I keep having to move myself around here. You could write Studio 4 research map. And then instead of insert your LOI here, you might replace this with your question. You don't have to copy the post. You can copy the design. You hit submit and it'll make you a new one. And then you can go to settings from there if you want to. If you just like hate my design and you want to do something else, you can change the icon. You can change the wallpaper, the color scheme, all of that stuff kind of on your own. I'm going to go back to the directions here. So your goal is to include at least 15 pieces of information from your research. When you're doing your annotated bib, you did, point back over here. When you were looking at your annotated bib, you were looking at like whole sources and like summaries and big picture stuff. And now you're really getting like down into the nitty gritty. Like when we were talking about like going to like your scholarly articles, like you had to maybe summarize that article, but when you did your close reading, I had you pick quotes and maybe note what graphs or images might be there, and even kind of showed you like which parts you might pull things from, and that's kind of what you're doing, is going through your sources and looking for specific things that stand out to you, so specific passages. So here are some ideas for how you can think about putting that information on there. You can add links to it. You can add a link to an individual source. So when you're here, you can go to link and you can paste, the URL to the source. And then, in the comments, you can note like, you can put like the quote or the statistic or whatever it is, and you can do as many as you need to. Or you can add it up here in the notes, whatever, you know, floats your boat for that. Or the opposite, you can post like quotes. So you can, like, the title of the source or note to yourself here. You can just paste, you know, the quote here and maybe like add a link to the source in the notes. Or you can add, there's a way to add like images. You can like upload like images, graphs, things like that. You can always add like video clips. And note like in the comments like which part of the video you might want to use, how you want to use it. If you're adding those images and graphs, you're also thinking about like how you might use it. If you're adding like quotes from experts or, you know, statistics, things like that, you're gonna note like what your response is or like why this stood out to you, how you might use it. So the goal is like to include the things and then do a little bit of thinking about like what you could do with it. We have a lot of things we're going to be trying to cover in this essay. So some things we talked about are, we went over the fact there's a lot of ways to use sources. So you might not just be looking for evidence. You might be looking for points from experts, like to prove things that kind of stand out to you. You might just want to keep or save in case you need it. Things that illustrators show the problem. So that's where like maybe some of your like digital media like images and videos might come in. You might have like your news stories and your first-hand accounts and your maybe some graphs and statistics that show a trend, like things that like really sort of illustrate the problem or the issue that you're talking about, because you'll need some of those things. Things that will represent like opposing perspectives or data. And again, like if you're talking about this opposing perspective, you might not have a source that is actually like from someone with that perspective, but you might find, you know, sources that explain that perspective. So it might be a journalist talking about like how this group feels, or, you know, this perspective. So anything that helps you sort of talk about that opposing perspective, or if there's like specific data or sources that they're using. It doesn't, and this is where like you can use data that maybe like represents or illustrates their point, you know, like graphs, things like that, but not necessarily like, we talked earlier about like having to read everything in the conversation, and you might want to note that like here's a source like a documentary that that this, you know, group or maybe just like a general audience, like lots of people like watch and believe, but maybe has some bias. Like maybe you want to pull in that source because you want to refute it or show like why people shouldn't be using it. So you could also think about some things like that. Knowledge building stuff. I would keep this to a minimum, because we're going to talk a little bit about how, like how you need to be really selective when you're including what you want to do to like set the scene for your audience. We tend to think like background sections need to have just all this information, and that's typically not true. So you want to think about like what are some things your audience really needs to know or could be helpful. If you want to include like links to things that aren't necessarily sources you want to use, but just like helpful links, like and some of the examples that we looked at did this too, like they didn't just link to their sources, they linked to like further reading or how-tos or other helpful things, so you're welcome to include those. Important events, things like that. So these are all kinds of information you might need. There's other things, but these are kind of like 5 just sort of like main ideas. The goal is just to get a lot of different things, so you're like kind of saving, so that way when you're working on your thought letter, you're working on like your ideas for what you want to say, you're working on getting some information together. We're going to start organizing and putting it all kind of together, kind of scaffolding it a bit. When you're done, submit the link. So here's some instructions on how to do that. Basically, you just sort of hit share and you scroll down to copy link to clipboard. It's pretty easy. And again, like, just a note, like this is very open to like you personalizing this. I kind of say like 15, kind of as a minimum and as a guide. It's recommended for you to just really kind of use this to help like plan and like save things for later, basically. So anything that stands out to you, add. You can have way more than, 15. I'm less interested in how you add things to your Padlet, like whether you go like by source and you put your quotes there, or whether you just have like quotes like how you do it is not super important to me, rather than me seeing that you're really like using this to like look through your research, make selections, have some variety, really think about like what you can do with those selections, or why they stand out to you. And that is Studio 4. Peace.